For the last 7 weeks, Bitcoin struggled to remain above $104,000. And in that same period, we've seen wild fluctuations in price, up to $20,000 within a few days. Now, we also see very wild and extreme emotions, from the depths of the lows to the extreme hype and greed of the tops. And so within this period, it's vital that you remain with the market if you're going to make a long-term success of your trading or investing portfolios. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you're new here. Each of the day's analysis builds upon the previous day. We're looking at some key metrics today. One in particular, should it continue to get rejected and break down for Bitcoin and cryptos, is not going to be great things in the short term. The reason I'm bringing this up now is that we have continued to falter at these higher prices. Now, longer term, just to settle the emotions, because things get pretty wild here in crypto, it still seems like we have some upside. But as I said, if we start to see this particular signal break down, that's where we need to pay particular attention and not get too lost with all of the emotions. Now, if you want to join an active community of traders and investors through any of the ups and downs in the market, because that's typically where people falter. Happens every single time. We saw it at each of the market cycle bottoms. Well, check out TIA Premium. Link in the top of the video description. Click that. Name, email address, and you'll be notified when our sale goes live next week. It's our 4th birthday sale. Been around here for a very, very long time. First up, Fink predicts 700K Bitcoin amid economic fears. Of course, I don't trade off of these headlines. We typically see them around the extreme excitement at, I don't want to say the final peaks, but you see them at local tops. And of course, we just saw over the last few days, Bitcoin break out to a new high and then close underneath it. So that's at 109. Longer term, still bullish. The cycle hasn't changed. Nothing's there to suggest that the 18.6-year cycle is shifting. But of course, if we continue to hang out for the case of BTC, at around that 100 and we start to break down from there, well then we've got to ask the question, how much longer does this thing have to go? And I've got a couple of metrics to show you in just a sec. Some other big things which continue to happen. Doesn't necessarily mean that the cycle is over, but sometimes things just need some time, like the markets need time to digest the move. Maybe they need time to digest the Trump presidency coming straight in, and we got to see some more executive orders come about. You know, it might not all happen in that same week. This one here, Bitwise files for a Dogecoin ETF in Delaware. I reckon it's an important one because, well, obviously we've seen the Doge get brought in by Trump, the Department of Government Efficiency, and so we might see some good things for the price of Dogecoin in the future as well. For the stock markets and the breadth and the movement to the upside, we're also seeing reasonably good signs here. So I know it starts to sound like, well, what are we doing? Are we bearish? Are we bullish? Short-term, long-term, different sides of things. And also we have different markets to look at here. We have the stock markets and of course we have BTC as well. In this case, we've got S&P 500 just tied a record streak of good breadth. This is from Sentiment Trader, something we often look back on or refer to for a lot of the market data for the S&P 500. Every day during the week, at least 68% of stocks in the S&P 500 advanced. So nearly 7 out of 10 stocks advanced. So it's a good breadth. We're seeing a lot of stocks heading up. Since 1928, when there were at least 4 consecutive days with 68% or more of stocks advancing, when the S&P traded within 5%, well, we're within 1% now of a new yearly high and all-time high in this case. The only loss a year later, so 12 months later, we're trying to look out here. We're still going to see positive signs here for the markets heading up, even if there is short-term volatility, maybe short-term downside, just trying to settle that longer-term view. Loss a year later was the last signal, which was terrible as it nearly coincided with the peak of the last bull market. So most of the time it's all right, but sometimes you can get one instance where it's not so good, and that's generally the peak. Could it be now? Well, that's the question that everyone wants to know. But when we take a look at some of the other signs here, so this one here is a similar volume-based sentiment shifting. So it precedes a bullish outlook. You still have relatively high percentage chances of the markets going up. So with a lot of criteria to meet here, this one here is an absolute mouthful. 84-day rank cycle from above 99% to less than 42% within the index, being above the 200-day moving average, so it's in a stronger position, and it's even stronger so because it's within less than 5% below a 2-year high, and exhibiting positive momentum. So we've also got that going on. There's a lot of criteria here. The S&P 500 displayed outstanding returns and consistency across all timeframes. Yes, of course, this is the S&P 500 ETF, SPY, but you're seeing a lot of positive momentum to the upside. Short term, I don't necessarily like the greatest look here, 76%, 70%, 70% is probably the worst, and then 73 and 73. But on the 12 month, you've got 84%, and it's actually higher when you consider this signal that happened just over 12 months ago. Remember, this column here is 12 months later. That one has also now been confirmed as positive. So that would increase this 84% hit rate to even higher for 12 months later. Having a look at the stock markets themselves, you can see S&P 500 had another higher day. So the price was higher, closed higher. But as I've been pointing out, that is something I don't necessarily love the look of. Typically, what we've seen in the past is it gets revisited. So it fills in some of this lower volume price range. So you can see the price is going up on lower volume. It might be strong or seem like strength at the time, but it's come back and rolled over. And as I've done on the channel many times before, we've looked at multiple examples of this happening. I can just see another quick one here, the price going up on lower volume, came back, retested some of that price, and then a couple of months later, came back and filled in all of that, that volume and that price rising. Now, the US dollar has been an interesting one over the last few days, as at the moment has hit some resistance at around 109, 110. And should this continue on and break down past our overbalance in price and time signals somewhere around 107, so breaking down below that over the next week or so, a few days to a week, that would be an overbalance in time and price. Couple more criteria to hit here, which would suggest that this is at least a local top, or it could be the lower top, like the final lower swing top of this entire move. A little bit more time to figure that one out, to get some confirmation of that, but that's what this is sort of building towards if we start to see these next couple of signals. The benefit or the beauty about that for Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies over this longer term is that it might relieve some of the pressure on the price should we see Bitcoin also drop off in price over this period if it's unable to hold its key levels, and I'll get to that with the sentiment in just a moment as well. So overall, this is not a bad thing for Bitcoin and risk assets. It's just going to take time, like the commodities and the traditional markets do. They take a lot more time to play out than Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. Some other positives around the globe are stock markets heading to new fresh highs. In the case of the top 50 in Europe, another fresh high, obviously off the back of the UK, Germany, I can see here hitting a new fresh high price, 21,254, and is literally now roughly around 6% away from a new all-time high, which was set back in 1999 to 2000. So it could be coming up to roughly a 25-year top or a 25-year high and a new all-time high. Big ones to look at as we continue forward. Australia also had a relatively good day yesterday, and as we open today, a little bit down at the moment, but nothing too concerning. Next up is MicroStrategy, and it's still playing on the rejection at $400. This one I talked about at length in yesterday's video, which I'll leave a link to at the end of this video if you want to understand MicroStrategy a little further, how this can continue to get sold off while Bitcoin puts in new highs. And this leads me to the first, I guess, sign here that I want to continue to follow on the channel. And by all means, do it on your own charts as well. Having a look at the previous cycle, MicroStrategy put in, let's call it 3 key tops. You had the all-time high in February, you had the next high in April 2021, and then you had the equal to April top in November. Bitcoin did a new all-time high in April, 65K, and then it did a 69K in November. Where, meanwhile, for MicroStrategy, it was basically a double top, and then the price came crashing down a lot. Have a look at it in terms of percentages, about 84% from that November top, and from the February top, obviously a lot more, basically 90% from that top. Can that happen again? I suspect it will, and if you want to listen to it coming from the mouth, from the man himself, Michael Saylor, he explains how this can actually happen and what happens for the buyers of the bond, the buyers of the stock, and how it can remain here but still not put in new fresh all-time highs. So if you're literally just a spot buyer from MicroStrategy, it's obviously a leveraged play on BTC, but it doesn't mean it's going to put in a new high if Bitcoin puts in a new high either. So you're going to have to play that game a little bit more cautiously, looking at the lows and then maybe selling out some at the highs. The thing to note here, or at least there's one data point, is that February top to the November top was 9 months. So almost dead on 9 months, so 273 days. Let's take a look at what that means this time around. So if I'm measuring from here, assuming that November 2024 is the final top for MicroStrategy, because that's the data that we have, we'll have to reassess if it ever breaks past $540 something dollars. 9 months puts this thing out to roughly August of 2025. So we still have, multiple dates coming in here for Bitcoin top later in the year. Doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to see a top for MicroStrategy. Doesn't necessarily mean that it has to come in right on that date. But I think it's interesting to note how this played out last time. And the one thing I'll add here, well, the extra thing I'll add here, is that through this period of the mania top, if you want to call it what's happening now, you can see that you've got the buyers that came in early are basically distributing through this sort of 9 month period. That's what I'm watching out for this time around. Are they going to be distributing through this period here? And within that, as a trader, that's what you're looking for. Massive volatility can happen. You've got a range there of 50% just within the top range so far. Should it get up to that the high, that's about a 90% range that the price can actually fluctuate. So it's it's what traders are looking for. Now I've got one final thing to add from my analysis this morning. I've been watching a few different podcasts, one in particular, What Bitcoin Did Here with Danny. This one is the update from Lynn Alden. Now, I'll just make one mention here. I think it's really, really interesting. In Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, a lot of us think that the Fed is basically going to turn on the money printer again, and you're going to see hyperinflation. There's just going to be tons and tons of money, and that's what's going to make Bitcoin go up. Danny asks Lynn flat out, is that what's going to happen? And she says, base case, no. Pretty interesting. If you want to take a look for it yourself rather than me go through it, check out this section in the video, when QE. It is possible, but it might be at a slower rate. So I think if anyone's expecting this huge, money printer turn on thing go burr, I reckon that's just same old BS rhetoric that you hear from all of the moon boys and I guess a lazy sort of analysis. I'll leave it at that, but I'll go and check this out. Lynn's obviously a really, really smart woman. Okay, over to Bitcoin cryptos and some of the other, the bigger sentiments here. If things start to lag at this point, I think it could get a little bit dicey for BTC. Fear and greed index dropped to 75, back down to greed from extreme greed. We saw that yesterday, extreme greed, and previously it's just been greed after greed after greed. And that leads to a similar pattern from the last time that we saw this pump up into extreme greed after a very quick reset into into neutral and fear. And like I showed in yesterday's video, this particular pattern back in 2021, extreme greed, that's the dark green, drops into neutral and fear, quickly bounces out back into extreme greed, and then again follows back down into neutral and fear. And you just got this big wild whipsaw of emotions. Price is still going higher, but it happened relatively quickly, right? And so this is the little period that I want to highlight, is that on that breakout, 31 days from the top, so you had the whole correction happen, the recovery, and then on the 8th of Feb, the breakout bar closed higher than the top. You see the pullback here, nice, comes back to retest the previous resistance as support, away she goes again, comes back and tests that resistance as support again, away she goes, so on and so forth, right? And that goes on for months. February into April, into May with the lower top, and then you had the significantly large correction here, that 50-odd%. But in this period, it had a quick, swift move back into extreme greed. Then it fell back to 55, which I think is on the border of neutral, maybe greed, but pretty much there on neutral. And then it continued higher as well. This time, similar. So if we were to see a bit of a rejection here and this reset again into neutral, it wouldn't be overly different, but it needs to come back. The sentiment needs to come back into extreme greed, or at the very least, the very high greed, I think, relatively quickly to sustain the hype and the price support here to then continue to push higher. That's what I'm seeing in the short term. So in summary, from the beginning half of the video, I'm still looking at the macro as things are progressing as they should. It looks like we've still got some volatility to get through. Obviously, there's volatility all the time, which is a bit of a throwaway line, I guess. But in the short term, the uncertainty is still there. And while this market remains where it is, you know, seeing 103 and we're not getting this push higher, like in 2021, it actually broke out. Extreme greed came back through, and then the price continued to push higher. If this continues to hang out here, then it just raises the chance that we're going to come back, retest 99. And if we test it too many times, well, you guys know what happens once you keep retesting support. Generally, it breaks down. So not to get too bearish on the whole situation, it's just what is happening right now. Like, that is the data that we have. That's how I'm reading it. You may have a different opinion. By all means, go ahead. But yeah, like I pointed out with the intro and this part now, if this doesn't sort of pick up relatively soon, then, well, what's happened to all of that hype that we saw over the last few days with the inauguration and, you know, everyone on YouTube and X and everyone expecting higher and higher prices, these big pumps, right? So while the price remains above 99, I'm cautiously bullish in the short term. Long term, let's forget about that now. Forget about that. I'm still long-term bullish. But in the short term, cautiously bullish while it remains above 99. Even better would be above this swing top at 102, 102 and a half, ideally 103. So whatever you want, call it 102, 103. That would be ideally much better, which we've talked about. A lot of closes above there, so it can continue to break through. And remember, this beautiful little white line here has also, called it's connected from the 2017 top. It's called those few tops there in 2021 early on, and then also connected to the final top in 2021. And so far in this cycle, we've hit it once and hit it twice without a breakout. Positive is higher lows continue to form. So that's why I continue to come back to this. Are we going to continue to see that the sentiment continue to push the price higher? Are we going to continue to see the price get supported here, roughly between sort of 99, ideally 103, to then mount the attack to break through this level? And I don't think it's going to be any easy feat either. Like, it's taken ages because this is a pretty strong diagonal here. You know, it's called basically everything up until this point. Another one to look at is the average true range for BTC. Don't forget, I've still got ETH, Solana, XRP, Sui, Pepe, Doge to get through. So I'll do another, some price analysis on those in just a sec. But yeah, the average true range here. And each of these times, when we start to see some sort of rejection and then the market go a little quiet, you generally see the true range, so the range of the bars tighten a bit, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, especially if you're in a longer term bull market. What happens at those times is that the majority of people leave the market. They leave, they wait for the price to get better again, and then they realize, why didn't I just buy it earlier? It happened here in 2024. I heard it from friends. I heard it from acquaintances. I heard it from comments as well. People sort of entering the game later, and they always leave. It happens every time. People get bored. You know, you've been watching this video for 15, 20 minutes by this stage. They get bored. They have TikTok brains, and they just leave and wait for the excitement to come back. The best times to be buying is when the excitement isn't there. And this one here, average true range, definitely, in my opinion, represents a lot of the lack of excitement. But if you can identify this chart along with the price chart and then put these two together, lack of excitement because you have smaller bars, less trading going on. But the positive, the thing you want to see is the macro lows getting higher. So the longer term lows getting higher. And throughout 2022 and 2023, you continue to see these lows getting higher. Yes, the average true range also got slightly higher because the price is increasing, but overall, this is pretty much down compared to where it was in the previous bull market. So lack of interest married with higher lows is going to set you up for that next move should it come into higher prices. And as I showed at the beginning of the video, it still seems like we have some more time left in this overall cycle to get to those higher prices. So don't go anywhere is essentially the message here. So don't go anywhere. Here are some price targets to have a look at. we're looking at the next key levels here. 110 is the 50% level for this shorter term weekly swing range. That's the 50%. Next 50% is at 118, 119, and of course you could throw in there 120. It's a psychological level. That is for the August to December range projected off this January low. That's the 50%. Key level for the market to slice through. Then we get up into the 130s, and then we can go absolutely bonkers and look at around the 150 level. And I also like 150 because it's basically almost a doubling. That low, 140.48, 150 is a doubling of the previous top there at 73,800. So that comes in right around there. So some nice price clusters coming together. Should we slice through this level, then the 120, then these 30s, and then you get into those 50s up there. Doesn't mean that's where I'll be selling. I might even sell a little bit lower than that just to avoid all of the hype. Let's wait till we get there. The point about the 50% levels is what we looked at last time. So how the market slices through 50%, like it did at 78K. And that was the entire range, which we have now hit on at dead on 100% at around 107,700. So a slicing through of the 50% is a strong sign. It gets rejected at the 50%, it's a weaker sign. Doesn't mean it can't go up further, it just means it's going to need more time and it may not reach the 100% range. So that's important because we are coming up to that right now at 110. And then I'm also interested in the 118, 119 as the next target because that is that's our larger range here, basically looking at the August to December range projected off where we currently are. So I want to see clean slices. Should this market sentiment pick up again? Should this average true range continue to pick up off the back of all this other hype that's been sitting there from the Trump inauguration and the presidency now? This needs to get through these levels, in my opinion, of course, relatively quickly over the coming week or two and close above those levels, which is similar to what we saw when it broke through that January top back in February of 2021. It sliced through and then continued higher into that next peak. With that in mind, USDT dominance is still playing with our emotions here. One day it tests and closes up, which is bearish for Bitcoin and crypto. The next day it comes back down, closes underneath these levels, which is bullish for Bitcoin and crypto. Next day it closes back above those levels, which is bearish. If it starts to head towards these levels at 4.6, 4.8, bearish for crypto. If it continues to break down here, that is going to be absolutely wildly bullish. Heaps and heaps of money getting back into the system, back into the crypto system, and everyone's going to be rich again. Except for the Ethereum holders. This has gone bloody nowhere. We're seeing $3,100, $3,700, and $3,500. It's basically been in this trading range now since December seasonal date there, 20th of December, whatever that is, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, right? Any more tests below this 31K, probably looking at the 27 to 29. And if we can break out of 35, I think we've got a good chance of hitting around 37 and then on our way to 41 and new all-time highs. And I've talked about those prices before, somewhere up around 5K, $5,300. For now, it is basically still stuck in a trading range. Solana, I put this one on candles so that you can see where these key levels are. You don't want to see Solana on a weekly chart continue to close below. Otherwise, probably going to test some lower prices. Long-term chart, white line here is at around $260. And if you wanted to, you could possibly squeeze it back down to around $255. Either way, I don't care. 260 is a pretty good level there. And we haven't seen closes above those previous old all-time highs yet on a weekly chart. This could be the week to do it. Obviously, we still have a few more days to go, but you need to start seeing closes above 260, 265 to maintain this bullish momentum, especially after such a ridiculously large bar that we saw last week. And that range is crazy. 74% in the week, $126 in 1 week. Remember, that's what Solana did over December into, well, the December top. So 12 months, it did slightly less because, of course, it started at $8, ran up to $126. Okay, so it did $118 in 12 months. Last week, it did $126 in 1 week. It's abnormal, and it has broken into new average true range highs. So it needs to keep up the momentum at this point. Otherwise, I won't say what happens. XRP. We're looking at XRP USD. It's still holding above the previous all-time high, so it's not the end of the world here, but it continues to just drop in slightly lower highs here. Again, the momentum. So with all these cryptos, you're just seeing the momentum begin to just slow down. But before you get all bearish on yourself, not on me, but before you get too bearish, it's in a lot of these cases, it's still holding key levels. Bitcoin still holding above the 99 to 103. Ethereum still holding, although weaker, still holding above 3,100. Solana, for now, still holding above 230 to roughly 250. And in the case of XRP, even better, still holding above 290, which is the previous top. However, it's failing at the 50%. Remember what we want to see. We want to see nice, clean sweeps of the 50%, clean breakouts of that 50% level. But out of the four, XRP is in that probably most strongest position along with BTC. SUI, on the other hand, continues to fail here. Now, this is on the US dollar, and it looks even worse. It's not the end of the world, but it looks slightly worse on the BTC chart because it continues to come down day after day after day. And it's something that we talked about, and it continued to develop over the last 3 weeks now from this all-time high and the closes underneath it with the lower highs. The positive, again, you're just starting to see momentum continue to die off here, but we haven't seen the significant breakdowns. That's going to come somewhere around $4 should it break those lows, $3.90 to $4, and then you'd look to be testing around $2.90. Hasn't happened yet, but the momentum has definitely slowed, and the time is basically equal to what happened last time and getting closer to extending on that, which means the bears are controlling this market for slightly longer, but the bulls are still holding the price. That's why it's the most difficult at this point. However, for some of the others here, like the memes, Pepe has now been down since that December top on the 9th, and it closed underneath that previous top, as you can see here. So the same sort of examples continue to come up, closed beneath the all-time high, started to see weakness early on. This is a complacency, and it failed at 50%. You can see the range here, 50%. And if we take a longer-term range going all the way back to the August low, basically dead at that top there. No closes above it and failed from there. So the next thing that happens generally is a breakdown of the 50% level, and it's getting very, very close to that right now. This one has already worked. You can see that it failed at 50%, came back down, rejected again. So that's now gone. And here it is, 1449. If it gets a breakdown from that, probably coming back to test around 1,000, 1,100. So that's Pepe in a weaker position if it breaks down from around 1,400. Currently at 1,500 now. On the other hand, Doge. Doge is in a slightly stronger position here, still holding above the major 50%, putting in higher lows. And of course, well, you've got Trump in now, Elon Musk. He's got his ticket into the White House whenever he wants. Obviously, Doge has had an executive order there, and it's looking like it's in a slightly stronger position here. Although, it still needs to get above 42 cents again, and to the downside, the invalidations are around 28 cents. And so overall, you can see with a lot of these charts, they're in a bit of a precarious position. Nothing has confirmed any sort of breakdown to much, much lower prices, but the longer things hang out here, the longer it gets, a lot of these markets get rejected at their key levels above that they need to break through in order to confirm the uptrend, then things start to get a little bit precarious. So we can remain cautiously bullish here. What we want to see relatively soon, sentiment pick back up like it did in the old days, like it did in the old days prior to that, and then start to push past key resistance levels overhead. Very, very strong key resistance levels overhead for BTC, and of course underneath here for USDT dominance. Remember, the 4-year birthday sale is on next week. Link in the top of the video description, name, email address, and you'll also get the free report and our quick start guides as well. Plenty over there. Plus, I've got plenty more coming up for you guys on the channel. Ideally, I'd love to see this thing hang out here, hold above 103, and then mount our attack and slice through 109,000. That's what I want to see from the bullish side here. So we can quickly get to the 130s, 140s, and 150s, and let this thing be a nice blow off top in the first half of 2025. Let's see what happens from this point. I'll see you guys back here at the next video. Like and subscribe, and have a great day. Cheers.